Good morning all of you students. So welcome to again lecture series for MSc Physics second year. We have to see here the subject is the energy study, and we want to continue the first module, so that is energy resources and energy scenario. So summarize the last lecture. In last lecture we have to see that the types of the pollution, that is you have to know that indoor pollution and outdoor pollution. So that indoor pollution mainly caused by the use of the conventional stove like as chullas, which have created the pollution, and that consequences that the nearly about 5 lakh small children and women die for these causes. And next type of the pollution is the outdoor pollution. So that type of pollution caused by the excessive amount of fossil fuels burning. Okay, and after that we have to see that what is the major way to avoid this type of pollution. For example, we have to use of the alternative source of the fossil fuel, use the electric or battery type vehicles and others say that, and conventional or renewable energy sources uses as also the alternative source of the fossil fuel. Next point we have to see here, so various pollutant that which cause the pollution. So that is list is here. So that is first of all that particulate matter. That particulate matter affect the environment for the visibility of the environment, and low intensity of light comes from the earth's surface, etc. So that is in the this particulate matter, and that hazardous to the environment or harmful effect. Next one is say that last lecture in the carbon dioxide, that is CO2, or we have to see that initially that carbon dioxide is originally or originated not harmful for the effect, because it is the main part taken in the part of the process of the photosynthesis. We have to extract the energy or food in the plant, and all other the animal or human being that depends on the food of the plants. So this is the main part in the taken part in the photosynthesis, and that plant is release the oxygen which is helpful to the respiratory system for the all systems. But if we increase or if increase the excessive burning of the coal or something, that is the excessive emission of the CO2, and that is the hazardous for the environment, that which is released the greenhouse gases. Next one is the carbon monoxide, that is CO, and that carbon monoxide which is originate from the incomplete combustion of the fuel or coal in absence or impairs of the air. So and this carbon monoxide is hazardous to the human being for the diseases like cause the headache or depression, something that. And after that see here the next one is the sulfur oxide, and that sulfur oxide is also hazardous from the human being or environment, that causes to the acid rain and which is harmful to the agricultural base. And next is various types of the pollutant is the nitrous oxide, that nitrous oxide consider as the formula for the NOx, and that NOx that is the oxides of the nitrogen. So oxides of the nitrogen such as, so oxides of nitrogen such as N2O or NO2, NO, N2O, N2O3, N2O, N2O3, that are the oxides of the nitrogen, are commonly referred as to the NOx formula, that is commonly referred as NOx. So that is the changing this number, valency number, and that if you see, that is the about 18% of nitrogen oxides in the atmosphere are produced due to the natural causes of the biological reactions. Okay, so that you know that, suppose for example biological reactions on the, suppose dead animals, dead plants and dead agriculture waste or something blah blah. So that biological reaction takes place on that matter, so we have to emission of the oxides of the nitrogen, and that about the 20% due to the man-made causes, mostly due to the combustion of process in air at the high temperature, and after that, so 20% of the nitrogen oxide which is emit from the man-made processes like the combustion of the fossil fuel in the at contact of the air or at high temperature, something that, and that NOx is from the interaction of N2 and O2, that is the oxygen molecule at high temperature. Okay, so we have to see here the harmful effect of oxides of the nitrogen at the environment or the human being or the nitrous oxide R is given by, first it is causes on the respiratory and the cardiovascular illness. Okay, so that first is disadvantage or effect, harmful effect is it causes to the respiratory and cardiovascular illness. Next one is it is deprives the body tissues of the oxygen, and next one is it also forms the acid in lungs and therefore more toxic of the CO. So that is the harmful effect of the nitrous oxide, and the safe limit of the nitrous dioxide in the atmosphere which is given by the range is the 100 microgram per meter cube. So or this is the annual average, so that is the harmful effect of the nitrous oxide on the environment or also human being. Okay, so next main point, so this is very interesting point we want to see here, so that is the greenhouse effect and global warming, and this is very important point in this like in this chapter or module first. So that is the, and in the exam this on this point 100% questions will be asking in the examination. So that is main point is the greenhouse effect and global warming. Greenhouse effect and global warming. Okay, so that is main point is the greenhouse effect and the global warming. So starting from this greenhouse effect, actually what is mean by the greenhouse? Okay, and that greenhouse is an enclosed having the transparent glass pane or the glass sheet. Okay, so a greenhouse is an enclosure, a greenhouse is an enclosure having transparent glass planes. Having transparent glass planes and sheets. Okay, so this is known as the greenhouse. Actually, why it is used, or what is, how it is the structure of this greenhouse considerably, basically, as suppose this is dome like structure in the agricultural field. uh, okay, so this is roughly diagram for the greenhouse. So actually what happens here, okay, so this is roughly diagram of the greenhouse. So actually what idea is here, so normally we have to consider that behaves differently, so that the visible radiation comes on the earth surface. Okay, so that radiation is comes on the earth surface, and this radiation which is absorbed in the earth surface, so after that absorption, so some radiation are emit or reflected back in the atmosphere. But in this greenhouse effect, what happens is here that it appears the transparent of incoming solar radiation and allows the entry of the sunlight. So what happens, suppose for example this is the sun structure. Okay, so sun, so that sun emit the solar radiation, or this solar radiation is incident on this on the earth surface, or suppose that this is the atmosphere part, or this greenhouse is on the surface of the earth or in the agricultural side, and this is the atmospheric part, and some solar radiation is incident on the earth surface or in the this greenhouse. So what happens here, so that long wavelength solar radiation in terms of sunlight is incident on this greenhouse, or that radiation is comes for or absorbed in the earth surface. Okay, so that is, this is known as the solar radiation. Okay, and this solar radiation, after the absorption on this surface, we have emit the radiation, and that emit radiation is known as the IR or infrared radiation. So that have emit the radiation on any direction. Okay, so that is the IR radiation or infrared radiation. Okay, so what happens here, so that absorb this solar radiation and emit this the IR radiation, and this is like a globe type structure, and this greenhouse which is restrict to this radiation to outgoing for this in the atmosphere. So that radiation will be stop in this only dome type structure or globe type structure, and due to the restrict for this radiation, so here more amount of heat is generated, and that more amount of heat is generated or in this structure, so which is used for in the uh, very thunder or very winter area. In this area we have to use this type of to given the good types of the agricultural crops, and this sunlight becomes largely opaque to reflect the infrared radiation from the earth surface, and that is the preventing the heat, and this greenhouse maintains a controlled warm environment inside the growth of the plants. So that is what, so that the warm climate it is created in this greenhouse, and which is useful to the taking the crops, and this especially places where the climate is the very cold, so that uses in specially the cold climate area. So this is rough structure for the only greenhouse, not greenhouse effect. So this is the working principle of the greenhouse, and we have to see what is mean by the greenhouse effect. Okay, what is mean the greenhouse effect? So that is greenhouse effect, so that is the CO2 envelope present around the globe. So that is like suppose this type of atmosphere structure. Okay, so here atmosphere, so like this, so this is our, this is dome type structure. So similarly created from the surface in the atmosphere. So this is CO2 as the globe like the structure, and that CO2 envelope present along the globe of the atmosphere behaves similar as to the glass pane, as initially just like this is a glass pane or glass sheet, so that is restrict this air radiation going to the outside, so that this type of globe, so that is CO2 globe, is doing or create the condition from the warm or hotter, and this is working principle as similar like to this globe and glass plane sheet, and this forms a bleak global greenhouse, and this tends to prevent the escape of heat from the earth. So what happens here, if the layer of the CO2 and other greenhouse gases which is created in the atmosphere, so that is what, so which have the solar radiation is incident on the earth surface. Okay, from this side, on anywhere side on the earth surface. So what happens here, suppose this is what sunlight or ultraviolet radiation, that is UV radiation, which is incident on the earth surface, and which have reflect the IR radiation. Okay, so that IR radiation is reflect from the earth or infrared radiation. So what happens here, suppose the CO2 like globe and other greenhouse gases which has created the globe like structure in the atmosphere, and which is restrict to this IR radiation going to the atmosphere and upward side, and that's why, so uh, the surface layer of the earth and the in the atmosphere and the temperature of the earth will be increasing, and this effect which is known as the phenomena is known as the greenhouse effect. So here I have writing the deeply, so what is mean by the greenhouse effect. So a the CO2 envelope present around the globe, the CO2 envelope present around the globe in the atmosphere behaves similar in the atmosphere behaves similar to a glass pane to a glass planes and form a big global greenhouse and form a big global greenhouse, and this big global greenhouse, this tends to the prevent the this tends to the prevent the escape of heat from the earth, the escape of heat from the earth, and which leads to the global warming. So that heat, that escape of heat from the earth, and that tends to the and which leads to the global warming, and this phenomenon is known as greenhouse effect. Okay, so generally what consider here, so that is the CO2 envelope that present around the globe. Okay, like previous minute ago I have show here, so that CO2 globe that present around the globe in the atmosphere, that behaves like to a similar glass sheet or the plane sheet, and this planes forms a big global greenhouse, and this tends to the prevent the escape the heat from the earth, and which is leads to the global warming, and this effect is known as the greenhouse effect, or we have to see here the diagram. So for example, uh, this is the sun, so which is radiate the solar radiation. Okay, so for example, this is considered as the earth surface, and on this earth surface, okay, so for example, this is shown as the earth surface, and uppermost layer of this is suppose consider as the atmosphere. Okay, so what happens here, so that solar radiation which is incident on the earth surface, so that is long wavelength of the solar radiation is directly go in the on the or incident on the this earth surface. Okay, and some short radiation which is go in passage of the atmosphere. Okay, so suppose this long wavelength is considered as the is considered as the long wavelength. Long wavelength. Okay, and some radiation is incident for here and going to the reflect direction, because this is not very much power to going on the earth surface, so that is considered as the short wavelength. Because we have to know that, so that is the various differentiation of the solar radiation, because some radiation is the UV radiation, IR radiation, visible radiation, something that. So some radiation have the short wavelength and some radiation have the long wavelength. And so what happens here, so that short wavelength radiation is comes to in terms of the passage of the this atmospheric region, and which is reflected again back. So this is not due to cause of the this earth surface, but some radiation has long wavelength, and that long wavelength radiation is incoming this earth surface. And what happens here, so that earth surface is incident, so that radiation will be absorbed and some radiation will be reflected or emitted back again. So that emitted radiation or reflected radiation is go in the atmosphere. But what happens here in the atmosphere, so which have the greenhouse gases which is released from the earth atmosphere, so that has created this globe like structure. And that globe like structure for, or similarly as the glass plane sheet or glass like structure, so which have restrict this greenhouse gases, and that due to the cause of this restricted radiation cause to the warm or heat the earth surface or the earth climate or the atmospheric climate, and this is known as the greenhouse effect. So greenhouse effect, and that CO2 and other greenhouse gases in the atmosphere trap the keeping the earth warm. So here, so that is due to the cause of CO2 and other greenhouse gases. Okay, so which is caused to the this effect. So actually what is say here, so that means that we have to see that like this first of all we have to see that this is greenhouse structure similarly as. Okay, and this structure is same like globe or a glass sheet, so which that is radiation is comes here is or incident on this. So what happens, so that radiation is absorbed, some radiation is absorbed, short wavelength radiation is reflected from the this sheet, and some radiation absorbed and reflected or emit the IR radiation, and this IR radiation, this glass sheet is restrict to going to the outside, and due to the cause of the warm and heat of the atmosphere inside this greenhouse. And similarly this effect is also this restricted radiation which is caused due to the warm or heat the earth surface or earth atmosphere, and this is known as the greenhouse effect. Okay, and actually what means that, so the concentration of the CO2 in the earth, okay, so continue for this lecture. So where we have to see that, so that is the concentration of CO2 in the atmosphere, so that is nearly equal to the 0.03%. So we have to see that, so the concentration of CO2, concentration of CO2 in atmosphere is 0.03 degree Celsius. So not degree Celsius, in percentage. So that concentration of CO2 in the atmosphere is 0.03%, and it is due to the effect of the earth to maintain an average surface temperature is at the 15 degree Celsius. So that nearly equal to the 0.03% of the CO2, so that have maintain the earth temperature, maintain the earth temperature is nearly equal to the 15 degree Celsius, so that have maintained the earth atmosphere. If the absence of this layer or the concentration of CO2 is 0.03%, so that have going to the temperature of the earth is nearly equal to minus 25 degree Celsius, and that frozen cleanest above the earth atmosphere is the minus 25 degree Celsius. So that is the temperature of the outer atmosphere, and that is further increase. So if the further increase the concentration of CO2 from the prevent level will upset the temperature and balance, and that is the various of types of the consequences for facing the earth and earth atmosphere and living things, something that. So apart from this CO2, many of other greenhouse gases which is present in this globe life structure. So that is the apart of the CO2, other gases such as the methane, nitrous oxide, hydrofluorocarbon, that is HCF, sulfur hexafluoride, and water vapor. So all these gases are known as the greenhouse gases. Okay, so we have to see here, apart from CO2, the gases including methane, hydrofluorocarbon, carbons, so that is known as the HCFs. After that, see here, sulfur hexafluoride, sulfur hexafluoride. After that, the water vapor, so water vapor, so these gases is known as greenhouse gases, okay, and these gases which is cause the greenhouse effect, and that so that is which is gases is concerned. So that is apart from the CO2, which gases, so that is methane gas, hydrofluorocarbon, that is HCF. This is the main component or main matter which is caused to the greenhouse effect. Other is sulfur hexafluoride, and will also the water vapor. So these are the components or gases which is cause the greenhouse effect. Or we have to know that, so total concentration of or emission of the CO2, so that is the 80% emission of the CO2 which is created for the developed countries. Okay, so that countries which are very good developed, such as USA American country, European country. So these are the developed country, or for example India, or for example Pakistan, and other countries such as Myanmar, something that. So that such country are the developing country. Okay, so this developed country which is great or emission of CO2 is the 18%, and developing country and other country which have created the CO2 emission is near about the 20%. So that extra emission of CO2 from the developed country, so that is 82%, which has due to the cause of the greenhouse effect. So this is the idea of the greenhouse effect. Okay, and see that the global warming is being caused due to the emission of the excessive emission of the CO2 because of the burning of the fossil fuel in the industry. Okay, so this is all over the idea about the greenhouse effect, and we have to see what is mean by the global warming. So that is, global warming is being caused global warming is being caused mainly due to the excessive emission of CO2 because of the burning of the fossil fuels, because of the burning of fossil fuels, okay, and this burning of fossil fuel in industry and burning of wood due to the agricultural waste, and burning of wood due to the agricultural waste, etc. So this is known as the global warming. So why cause the global warming, and why increase the heat or temperature of the earth, increase the temperature of earth due to the global warming? And this global warming is arising being caused the mainly due to the excessive emission of CO2 in the industry and burning of the wood in the agriculture waste, that is caused the global warming. Okay, and if we see that the average range of temperature or average global temperature is increased at a rate 0.2% per decade in the recent years. Okay, so this is alarming, that increasing the global warming or increasing the temperature at per many recent decades, that is 10 to 20 years. So 0.2% of the temperature will be increasing of the earth, and this may lead to the melting of the polar snow caps, glaciers, thereby increasing the level of the ocean and redefining the ocean boundaries, which have caused the flooding, low lying areas, smaller island. Okay, so this type of consequences is arise due to the increasing the temperature. We have to cause the global warming, and you know that, so that Arctic cover in the Arctic down by ice cover in the Arctic is down by the 14%, and ice cover in the Antarctic is covered by 25%. And that expert is alarmed that, and expert predict that, so that more frequent and severe heat waves, intense tropical cyclones, and change in the rainfall patterns due to the cause of the global warming, and that melting of the ice and glaciers at the mountains that causing the floods, followed by the declines of the water supplies and the increased incident diseases like the malaria. So these are the effect of the global warming on the earth surface and the atmosphere, because you know that if temperature is increased, the earth temperature increase, so that is directly effect on the snow caps or glaciers of the ice, and that is mostly ice covered area which is located in the Arctic and Antarctic. So that is respectively as a 14% and 25%. If the temperature is increased due to the cause of the global warming, which have effect, so that is these are the melted glaciers and ice caps, and this is due to the cause of the consequences arises like the flooding of the lower areas and small ice caps, etc. So this is very alarming or danger situation. And now next main point in this point is the that climate change. Okay, and this type of climate change is also known as the, or is also called as the global warming, refers to the long terms of the fluctuation in the temperature, precipitation, and wind, and the elements of the earth climate system, and the energy use has abstract, such as the huge attention nowadays importantly due to the associated of the global warming impact. So because why this type of global warming is arises, because of you have to know that so many production like increasing in the industry, or we have to harnessing the such different types of energy which is create the energy. But one drawback is here, if we creating and the energy or absorbing and harnessing energy, some types of disadvantages also there, because this uh, is created the pollution or release the greenhouse gases in the atmosphere, and due to the cause of this greenhouse gases in the atmosphere, or CO2 concentration is increased in the earth atmosphere, which has causes the global warming and greenhouse effect. And due to the cause of this, so and this is also is depends upon why it is increasing the CO2 concentration and global warming, or global effect on the earth for the greenhouse gases which is increased due to the increasing the fossil fuel use have led to increase the CO2 emission, leading to the greenhouse effect and the global warming and to climate change, and will continue to the change. So that have show here the currently table for here. So what is the condition is 2002, and what is condition is in future is 2021. So in 2002, so that is the present change is the temperature is increased by 0.6 degrees Celsius, and in future so what changes is there, so that global mean temperature will be increased 0.5 degrees Celsius. So you know that, so what uh, 2000 and 2021, so or 2100, okay. So this century, so what type of change in that many decades, so that temperature will be increased 0.6 degrees Celsius to near about to 5.6 degrees Celsius, and the level of the sea or the ocean in 2000, so that have level is increased by the, or listen, 4 to 10 inches is increases. But in the future, so that in projected in the 2100 years, so that is 6 to 68 inches will be increased. So that is the effect for the greenhouse and global warming on the ocean, and that so that is very harmful effect, or this is very serious condition for the global warming. And this is the idea of the greenhouse effect and global warming. So see that this point we have to conclude that, so very seriously need to use the alternative sources which has reduced the concentration of the CO2 and greenhouse gases that are released in the earth surface due to the prevention of the earth atmosphere and other lives. So next lecture will be considered as will be see here the what is mean by the acid rain, and what is the acid rain effect on the agriculture as well as the earth atmosphere. So this point will be seen in the next lecture. So thanking of you, and do study hard.